Shalom, Shavua Tov. I'm Yekutiel Ben Yaakov, commander of the Israel Dog Unit, speaking to you from Kfar Tapuach in Israel on the 5th day of Nisan, 9 days before Pesach. And I want to speak to you about a corona, but not the type of videos which I've been sending out until now, which is speaking about this horrible crisis and this horrible curse and what it all means. We're going to address some of that tonight about what we can do to prevent the spreading of this horrible pandemic and how we can save lives. What is the spiritual tikkun, if you will? What do we need to fix on a spiritual level to stop this horrible, horrible plague, which is destroying the global economy and which is causing the needless suffering and death of so many people around the world and even here in Israel already. But I want to speak today about a different angle. I want to talk about words of hope, of redemption, of speedy recovery, of reversing this curse into a blessing, because it is in our hands. God is not a cruel God. He does not bring upon us arbitrary punishment for no reason. He gives us an opportunity to do tshuva, to bring redemption, and every single plague which is created, also God creates the remedy and the cure for it, the physical medical cure, and that's connected to the spiritual cure, and it's in our hands. So I want to talk to you today about that and give you words of hope, give us words of hope. Within this plague is also folded within it, as they say in Hebrew, mekapelet betocha simanei geula. There are clear signs of redemption. The redemption is here. Mashiach is knocking at our door. Great things are happening. And it's in our hands to bring the redemption speedily, majestically, without pain. You know, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says there's two ways to bring redemption. Bi'ita achishena. The verse says what seemingly would be a contradiction in Isaiah, and the Gemara in Sanhedrin points this out. On the one hand, it says redemption will come speedily. On the other hand, it says it will come in its time. Well, is it coming quicker, speedily, or in its time? And so the Gemara answers that if we merit it, we can bring the redemption earlier. We can usher in the redemption without needless suffering, majestically, in a great, great, great way, with miracles and a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful redemption. On the other hand, if we don't merit it initially, we're going to have to do tshuva eventually anyhow, but it will come through suffering. Because in the end, make no mistake, we have to do tshuva. There has to be faith in God. Otherwise, we're not people that merit redemption, and we're not people that can appreciate redemption. I mean, are you going to buy an ice cream for your child if he's going to take it and throw it in the garbage? If he appreciates it, then everybody's happy, and bring him the ice cream and he'll be happy. But if he doesn't appreciate it, then what's the point of buying him the ice cream? There's no point in bringing redemption to the people of Israel unless we're on a level, unless we appreciate God, unless we are humble enough to understand God's hand in the creation of the world and recognize God's existence. And then we can be people that are barei geula, that we are children of redemption, and we can appreciate the redemption, and we're there at that level. So the question is, what do we have to do to prove that faith? What do we have to do to achieve that level of tshuva where we have that faith in God to merit redemption? And that's what we're going to discuss today in the few minutes that we have at our disposal. And so, but I want to tell you something, that we are living in a special time. This is a process of redemption which started when we returned home to Israel. Jews coming from the four corners of the earth, and the land bearing fruits, and all of the other signs of redemption which are mentioned in the Talmud, which are mentioned in the Bible. We are living in that special generation. From the ashes of the Holocaust was born the state of Israel. From the epitome and the peak of desecration of God's name came the sanctification of God's name and Jewish power, and the birth of the state of Israel. So let's understand what we need to do now to complete that process and what God is expecting from us in this unprecedented plague which He has brought upon us. And the Talmud tells us, the Medrash tells us, that before the redemption comes, there will be a plague, a great plague. We're seeing that great plague, that historic plague, that unprecedented. I mean, we are all locked in our houses all over the world. Jews are dying. 5% of the people that are being killed by this plague in London happen to be Jewish, and in Brooklyn the plague is incredible, and in Lakewood, in Jewish communities around the world. And in Israel, it's already come here, unfortunately. We've had an opportunity to do tshuva. We're going to speak in a little while about what we need to do to stop this plague on a spiritual level. And but it's already hit here. We had our chance, and now it's, unfortunately, we are paying the price here in Israel, but it can be stopped. Just like it says, B'Nisan nigalu, B'Nisan atidi nigael. In the month of Nisan, which we have just entered, we were redeemed from Egypt, which is the prototype for all future redemptions. And in the future, or in the present, we will be redeemed in Nisan. It's around the corner. This is the season of Passover and the season of redemption. The Netziv says something very interesting. When we talk about Gog and Magog, we always, most people think about the Gog and Magog as meaning a war. But the Netziv says, no, it's not a war necessarily. Gog and Magog can symbolize a plague. This is what the Netziv says on the Sifri in Ba'alotcha and Bamidbar. He says that it is a plague, and he proves it by saying that when you look in Yechezkel, when it talks about this horrible war of Gog and Magog, the end game, the final war, you don't have, it doesn't say anywhere in Yechezkel Lamed Chet, chapter 38 and 36, when it talks about the great war, it doesn't say it's a war. And he says, therefore, we learn that it's a Magifa, which is what the Medrash says in Shir Hashirim. Also, which we said that there'll be a great Magifa. And it's no coincidence that Corona, if you look at the Gematria, which is 361, happens to also be the numeric value of Mashiach coming. And it's no coincidence. And COVID-19, in Hebrew, if you spell it Chaf Bet Daled 19, it also equals the same number as Geula, as redemption. And within this Magifa, within this horrible plague, is the symbol of redemption if we merit it, if we understand it. And the sooner we understand what we need to do, the sooner we will stop the plague, stop the death, and stop the needless suffering. And so let's understand what are some of the qualities of redemption. What are some of the aspects of redemption? Well, first off, the Talmud tells us, and the Bible says clearly, that there will be revenge upon the nations before the redemption. It says in Isaiah that Kiyom nakam b'libi ushnat geulai ba'a. When there is revenge in my heart, the Almighty says, then there will be redemption. And there is a reason for that. Because the whole purpose of redemption is so that the world recognizes God's existence, the God of Israel, and He is one. And you cannot recognize His existence if you think that it's Trump, and if you think that it's the United Nations, and if you think that it's anything else but the God of Israel. It has to be a situation where we have no one else to rely upon but God. And then you can see that it is God's hand. And that's what happens in the redemption. When He hits the enemies of Israel, the people that historically hurt the Jewish people, that's when you know, when you see that Iran is getting hit hard, that Spain, for the Inquisition, is getting hit hard, that Italy, which symbolizes the church that sits in the Vatican, is hitting hard for all the persecution that it did against the Jews throughout the generations. When you see that China, the greatest atheist nation, which doesn't accept God's existence in the world, that they're getting hit hard, it's not a coincidence. You know, the root of corona is keri, which means coincidence. And the Rambam says, it brings the verse in Leviticus, Vayikra, that if you say when any horrible thing that's happening on the world, or any great happening on the world, if you say that it is just a coincidence, mikre, Keri, the root in Hebrew, I'll bring upon you more Keri. And that is the same root of the word corona. And it's no coincidence. You think, if you don't see the hand of God, if you don't want to research and understand what we have to do here, like the Rambam says, and like the Torah says of Vayikra, I will bring upon you more Keri. And that's what this is all about. There's an inyan, there's an issue of redemption which comes after makos, after revenge, just like the redemption from Egypt came after God brought the plagues upon the Egyptian. That is the prototype of all redemptions, the redemption from Egypt. Anything that was written in the Bible and in the prophets was written for every generation. It's not just a storytelling history book, but it's there to teach us a lesson. And the lesson is that when you see that the Iranians that swear every morning and every evening that they're going to kill the Jewish people, and when you see the Chinese that are the greatest atheists in the world, and when you see the Italians, or the Rome, which represents the persecution of the Jews by the church throughout the ages, you know that the redemption is near. That's what it says in Yeshaya. Like we always say, ועלו מושיעים בהר ציון לשפוט את הר עשיו והייתה להשם המלוכה מושל בגויים. When you see that the saviors go to the Mount Zion to judge the children of Esau, you know that God's kingdom is going to be there, and that's the purpose of the redemption, just like it says by the Makot, that's to show God's name. You know that God is governing the world, and it's a time of redemption. And this is all to bring us to a situation where we are going to do tshuva. It says, "K'shakadosh Baruch Hu poreh v'nomot shmo mitkadesh v'mitkadesh ba'olam." We say that when God persecutes, when God takes vengeance against the nations, that his name will be exalted among the nations, because that's the way that you know that God exists. When the Nazis took the Jews and pulled them by the beards and said, "Jid, walk into the gas chambers," there was no greater desecration of God's name. And like it says in Yechezkel, in chapter 36, in chapter 38, and we say it in all of our prayers and throughout the Hillim and all of the Tachanunim, if we only paid attention to what we're reading and don't just babble the words, it says that the redemption will come not because we deserve it, because we don't, but the redemption will come because of God's name's sake that was desecrated among the nations, because like Rashi says, Shiflu Tam Shel Yisrael Chilu Shemohu. When the Jewish people are denigrated, not persecuted, and the Jid is thrown into the gas chamber, and the Goy says, "Where is your God now? If he is a God, and if he is powerful, then why can't he save you?" And the word Chilul Hashem comes from the root Halal. Lashon HaKodesh, the Hebrew language, is not German, and it's not English. It is a divine language. And Chilul means vacuum, empty. And when the Goy can say, "Where is your God, Jid? He doesn't exist. He is powerless. He is weak." That's when God has to save the Jewish people, not necessarily because we deserve it, but for his name's sake. And that's the whole concept of redemption or sanctification of God's name, regardless of what they teach us. Of course, there's an Indian of Kiddush Hashem, there's other aspects, but that's the main issue here. So now I just want to briefly say, I wanted this to be 10 minutes, but I think it's going to be 12 or 13 minutes, this video, because I understand that in the age of video, and in the age of media, and in the age of movies, people don't have the zitzreich, they don't have the patience to sit for more than 12 or 13 minutes, and more than 5 minutes, and I'm included in that. Who can sit for more than 5 minutes and listen? But this is interesting, and I'm about to tell you the cure to this coronavirus. So stay tuned here. What do we have to do here? And a lot of rabbis are saying a lot of things. You're hearing a lot of rabbis, and I'm going to put it all together now, and I'm going to connect the dots, so pay attention. A lot of rabbis say this is about Aver Minachai. After all, it hit China first because the Chinese, they eat a lot of crazy things over there. And they eat Aver Minachai. They even rip live I heard, I don't know if it's true, they rip like live pieces off of animals and they eat it, and there's all kinds of videos circulating on the internet far and beyond now about this practice of what they eat there. And the bats and the mice and the animals, they rip them apart. And there's Avram and Achai, and there's all kinds of gematriot that if you eat, that even the goyim, which are obligated to observe the 7 laws of Noah, and they bring the verse and they bring the psukim about that and the gematriot, and of course we know that they're obligated to observe the 7 mitzvot of Noah, and they're not allowed to just eat a live animal and rip the limb off. So that's why it started in China, and I'm sure that there's some truth to that. And some people say that we have to strengthen ourselves in emunah, chizuk in emunah, and faith in God. And a lot of people say this is about Shabbat because it happened to come about the time in Israel when more and more municipalities were saying that were actually implementing desecration of Shabbat, with public transportation and so on and so forth. And there are rabbis like Rabbi Aryeh Lipa, which correctly said that it's connected to the Binyan HaMikdash, to the building of the Beit HaMikdash. And there were other rabbis that said it's connected to Israel and to Aliyah, and we've heard all the things, and they're all true. And Lashon Hara, and these are all things which we need to correct and which we need to work on. On a personal level, some of the things are personal issues like Lashon Hara, and some of the things are national issues like the Beit HaMikdash and so on and so forth. Let's understand something. Emunah mevi'ah geula, that redemption comes by us showing faith. Because if we don't reach that level of faith, what's the purpose of redemption? We're not barei geula. It's like throwing the ice cream in the garbage. What's the purpose of buying the ice cream? What's the purpose of giving the Jewish people redemption if they don't appreciate it, if they're not on that level to understand that, to be free from the servitude to the nations and so on and so forth, and they're going to be slaves to God. The Mechilta says, "Se'ein hagaliyot mitkatzot ela b'zchut emunah," that all of the redemptions come only through the merit of having faith in God. And of course, as we explained the rationale, that naturally there has to be a level of faith in God. It's obvious that we have to reach that level either by suffering to do tshuva or on our own volition, and the sooner the better. And what do we have to do to show our faith? So in the time of the redemption from Egypt, it says in the Torah, in Parshat Bo, Dabru el kol adam b'nei Yisrael imur b'ezro l'chodesh hazeh v'yichlu lechem ish sela beit avot sela bayit. It says that on the 10th of this month they shall take for themselves each man a lamb or a kid for each father's house. That we had to take the lamb and we had to tie him to our bedpost on the 10th of Nisan. Now it's the 5th of Nisan, and we had to show our faith in God. The whole redemption from Egypt came after this, and the rabbis teach us that it is for this reason that came the redemption, which is of course the chronological order of what's written in the Chumash. The redemption came only after we took the God of Egypt, the lamb, and we tied it to our bedpost on the 10th of Nisan until the 14th of Nisan. And the whole story of Passover and how God passed over our houses and he killed the Egyptians, that happened because we tied the God of the Egyptians, so to speak, we tied him to our beds and we shechted him, we killed him. That's the Paschal Lamb. That's the story of Pesach. I mean, Reformed Jews and Orthodox Jews around the world are celebrating the holiday of Pesach. What is the holiday of Pesach? God passed over the houses of the Jews because they had blood on the posts of their doors. The blood of the God of Egypt. The greatest provocation that they possibly could have made to the Egyptians and to their God, and the greatest manifestation of faith in the God of Israel. That our God is stronger than the God of Egypt. He's stronger than the lamb. And we see here that you have to roast it over the fire. And matzahs with bitter herbs shall they eat. You shall not eat it partially roasted or cooked in water. You can't even cook it in water, because if it's in water, it may, break up in the water as it's boiling. You know, you can't boil it, you have to roast it. So they see their God. They see the head and they see the body burning. That's the Inyan of Pesach. My God, it's 9 days away. That's what we're celebrating. Reformed Jews and conservative Jews and Reconstructionist Jews and Orthodox Jews understand what you're celebrating. What are you celebrating? You're celebrating that you took their God, that you had faith in our God, that you were nidbak, that you were caught with, you were connected to the God of Israel, and you separated yourselves from the nations, and you separated yourselves from fear of the nations. That was the ultimate faith that the slave in Egypt could possibly have shown, to take the God of their masters, to tie it to their bed, to shecht it, and to fry him, not even to cook him and not to boil him, that they see their God burning. That's Judaism, that's Pesach, that's redemption. You know, I sit here for days, I'm thinking about making this video, and I'm exceeding the 10 minutes, I know you're listening now. That's what the essence is. You want to break the plague? My God. You're trying to understand, what do we have to do? Of course, Lashon Hara is important. Of course, Kashrut is important. Naturally, Shabbat is important because that also symbolizes faith. And redemption will only come after faith. And we see that God is bringing us to a point where we have reached Shabbat. Suddenly there's no traffic. There's no buses. Nobody's moving. We're stuck in our houses. We're scared to hell about this horrible, horrible, horrible corona crisis, this horrible pandemic which is murdering people, and it's a test. Will we understand what it's about? We did not have the faith in God. We separated ourselves from God, and we connected ourselves to the Gentiles and to their customs and to fear of them. We were frightened of sanctions, and we were frightened of isolation. And so God brought upon us isolation. And Bibi said it very, very clear. Bibi said, and in one of our earlier videos, we actually showed the actual video from Bibi, where he said, the reason why I surrendered a strong victory in these elections is because I refused to listen, and I refused to agree and acquiesce to Ben-Gvir's condition that I allow Jews to come and move their lips and pray on the Temple Mount on Shabbat. And had I agreed to Ben-Gvir, he would have left the race for the Knesset, and he would have placed his support behind me, and I would have had a stronger victory, and I'm willing to surrender my political career so that because this would have ignited a war in the Middle East, he said. The Arabs, who knows what they would have done, who knows what the world would have done if we would have allowed Jews to move their lips and pray on the Temple Mount on Shabbat. And he was very proud of that, and he was prepared to commit political suicide, just so that the Jews can't pray on the Mount, just so that the world will not condemn us. It's all about fear of the Goyim. It's all about lacking faith in God. You know, so like we said, the Mechilta says that the redemption comes when we show our faith in God. And what is the greatest thing we can do to show our faith in God? According to Bibi, it would be the Temple Mount. That's like taboo. It's even taboo more than Kahana, you know, the Temple Mount. Like, my God, you know, the world, who knows what they're going to do if we pray, if we allow Jews to move their lips on the Mount, you know, like, my God, what's it going to be? What are the Goyim going to do? What are the Arabs going to do? That's the issue. That, if you want to know what is the Paschal Lamb, the Paschal Lamb is the Mikdash. The Paschal Lamb is allowing Jews to move their lips on the Temple Mount. Is increasing Jewish sovereignty on the Temple Mount. I don't care if you're right wing or you're left wing, but the Temple Mount, there's something romantic about that, about the Beit HaMikdash. That was the heart of the Jewish people. That is where God's crown was in the world. That was where his, if you will, where his palace was in the world. What kind of king doesn't have a palace? That's where the Shekhinah was. That is where God's presence is in the world. And we're frightened to allow Jews to even move their lips there because what the Goy will say. We're frightened to crown God, the God of Israel. then God brings upon us crown. And what does corona mean in Hebrew? What does it mean in English? And what does it mean in Russian? And what does it mean in Latin? Corona means keter. It means crown. We're frightened to crown God. We're frightened of isolation. God will bring upon us more crown, and He'll bring upon us isolation. You know, you think about it. People can't see their grandparents. They can't see their parents. They can't even be present at their levayot, at their funerals. This is unprecedented. We are put into a state of isolation, and we are put into a state of quarantine that is unprecedented in our history. It is unprecedented in world history. And why? Because we are frightened to be in isolation, because we are frightened of isolation, because we are frightened to tie our destiny with God. We are frightened to lidabek b'Hashem, to be tied to God. We are frightened to be under His wings, and so we will be under the wings of the atalef, of the bat, which some say is the cause to this horrible corona. We have a choice to lidabek b'Hashem or lidabek b'corona, להתבודד מהגויים or להיות לבד עם Hashem. We can stand alone with God, or we can stand alone in our rooms waiting for, and it's only a question of time before we all get corona, unless we do tshuva. And so, if you look in Tanakh, you want to know what the cure is to the coronavirus? Look in Tanakh. There are many, many examples of magifot, of plagues that plague the people of Israel. And if you notice, all of them, without exception, at least the ones that I've seen, all speak about Jews showing faith in God and separating themselves from the nations and dealing with the Mikdash, which, of course, as we've mentioned, is the peak of our faith in God, because His name is upon the Jewish people and His name is upon the Mikdash, upon the temple. And that is the maximum test of faith in our generation. For the Jew and the Gentile, the test is coming to Israel. Those of you that know me, and those of you that appreciate what I'm saying here, get on a plane, get into Israel. I will file the appeal to the High Court. Any Jew who wants to come here, I will find you a bed and a roof on your head. Come to Israel. Show your faith in God. Just like Shabbat brings redemption because it shows our faith in God, that we believe that God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day He rested, and we affirm that faith by observing the Shabbat. And like the rabbis teach us, if all the Jews observe stay Shabbatot, the Mashiach will come. So too, you coming to Israel and believing that you will survive here in Israel, despite all the obstacles, that will bring redemption. That will bring your personal redemption, and that will help bring the national redemption. And for the Jew in Israel, it's of course having the faith in God to do what He commands us to do, despite what the nation of the world will say. You know, so that's my message to you.